I'm Jeff Finkelstein, the President and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. I want to thank the City of Pittsburgh for making this space available and for making this possible tonight. I also want to thank the Pittsburgh Police and Sean Brokos, our Jewish Community Security Director, for all their work in keeping us all safe at all times. I'm going to read off some names, some people who will be speaking, others I just want to make sure I acknowledge. I apologize if I miss someone. I'll try to fill in later if we realize others are here. Representative Connor Lamb, Representative Guy Reschenthaler, Senator Jay Costa, Senator Devlin Robinson, Representative Dan Frankel, County Executive Rich Fitzgerald, Mayor Bill Peduto, Representative Ed Gainey, over 40 organizations in Jewish Pittsburgh who co-sponsored this evening, and our interfaith and non-Jewish allies. Thank you for all being here. Too often, I stand at podiums during difficult times. This is another. Jews constitute just 2% of the U.S. population, but we are the victims in more than 60% of religion-based hate crimes, according to the FBI's annual hate crimes statistic report. Let that sink in. A dramatic rise in anti-Semitic attacks has taken place since the most recent flare-up between Hamas and Israel. Some of those of a violent nature, including attacks in Los Angeles and New York that received national media attention. While it is certainly legitimate to have different opinions about specific policies of the State of Israel, or any country for that matter, Israel's fundamental right to exist and defend its citizens from violent attacks is non-negotiable. And the reason we're here tonight is attacking Jews physically or verbally because of disagreements with policies of the State of Israel are acts of anti-Semitism. I attended the Pirates game on Sunday. I got teary during the 7th inning when we all rose and sang, "God bless America, land that I love." I sang along with all the diversity of our Pittsburgh region, in one voice, as one American people. Hatred targeting any segment of this great Pittsburgh melting pot is unacceptable and must be called out. This is in line with the signs that shone through our city after the horrific attack at the Tree of Life building in 2018. No place for hate. We must make Pittsburgh into no place for hate. Anti-Semitism is the world's oldest form of hatred. We must work together with our Jewish allies to crush it, while working with those allies to crush all other forms of hatred and bigotry. Only together can we make a better world. Thank you again for being here tonight.
Good evening. I'm Representative Connor Lamb. I want to thank you for inviting me here tonight. Thank you. And I promise you I'll be brief, but to the point. Anti-Semitism has always been and still is based on a lie. And today, as in the past, lies can motivate violence, but they can never justify it. And the violent expressions and violent acts of anti-Semites cannot be disguised as any form of activism. We are all here tonight to say, they're not activism. This is anti-Semitism. I know that this is an event that's primarily about the violence, the anti-Semitic violence directed toward many Jewish Americans in recent days. But as a representative in our national government, I think it's important to say something about Israel, because there's been a lot of public confusion on this topic lately. I don't know a single person watching the events of the recent conflict who didn't feel an intense anguish and grief for the suffering of civilians, Palestinians and Israelis. But that feeling that we all shared and the desire that we all had to see the military phase come to an end has been misused by some people who simply want to question the very right of Israel to defend itself. We cannot forget the lessons of history. The Holocaust proved once again and finally that before the Jewish people had their own state, they had very few secure rights. The issue was and remains survival. And so allow me to be absolutely clear. Israel is a true friend of the United States. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And the existence of Israel is a fact. That is not negotiable. And yes, Israel has the absolute right to defend itself. Now, I do not believe, and I would never state, that Israel should be immune from criticism. I believe that the actions of the Netanyahu government have made it harder for our government to achieve its goal, which is to reestablish an actual peace process leading to a two-state solution. But these attacks on American Jews here inside of America are another thing entirely. And we have an obligation to defend those who are attacked and to prosecute hate crimes. Those crimes are defined in our laws, and they should be charged exactly how the law provides. All of us, every single person in our community, has the right to expect that. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Nate Navala. I am the District Chief of Staff for U.S. Congressman Guy Reschenthaler. Congressman Reschenthaler regrets not being able to join us tonight, but he asked that I share his strong support for Israel and the Jewish community in southwestern Pennsylvania and throughout the world. The very first time that Congressman Reschenthaler spoke on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, he took that opportunity to condemn anti-Semitism and all forms of racism and bigotry. There is no place for hatred in our nation. The severe increase in anti-Semitic violence, attacks, incidents, and rhetoric must not be tolerated. When the rights of any community that are under attack, all of our rights are under attack. We must stand together to condemn these despicable acts, and Congressman Reschenthaler stands firmly behind Israel and her right to self-defense, as well as the Jewish community here in Pittsburgh and throughout the world. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Representative Dan Frankel, and Squirrel Hill is the heart of my legislative district. I was just 3 blocks down the street on that October morning when an anti-Semite came into the Tree of Life congregations and murdered 3 of our friends and our neighbors. Weaponized anti-Semitism on that scale gets attention of the whole world. But the reality is that there are countless acts of hatred that paved the way to that devastating event on October 27th, 2018. Each of us has a role in stopping acts of hatred long before lives are lost. That means naming it and calling it out. It means standing in solidarity with all groups that have been targeted and harmed by white supremacists. Just like individuals must stand against anti-Semitism and other forms of hatreds, so too must our laws. That's why I, Senator Jay Costa, and Getty, who are prime sponsors of the hate crimes package, are working to get hate crimes updated here in Pennsylvania. These are issues that should be outside of the realm of partisanship and political fighting. They are about allowing people, no matter who they are, where they were born, how they worship, who they love, to live without fear. That's the Pennsylvania I'm going to keep fighting for, and the Pennsylvania we hope to keep. Thank you to the Jewish Federation for bringing us together today against anti-Semitism, a scourge that our ancestors fought and that good people of every generation have worked to vanquish. And thank you to everyone else here who is doing the work of creating a peaceful and inclusive world. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm County Executive Rich Fitzgerald, and I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I especially want to thank Jeff and the Federation for the great work that they continue to do day in and day out throughout our community. We are a special community, but we are less special when a group of folks are targeted because of how they worship. Our community has no place for the hatred and the anti-Semitism and the bigotry and the domestic terrorism that occurs against people because of how they worship. If we were to list the contributions of our Jewish neighbors over the decades in our community, we would be here for a long, long time. I want to thank the great people of this community who came here tonight and who continue to fight against anti-Semitism. We need to make sure that we are the most tolerant city, the most tolerant community, and that only occurs when everybody is welcome. Everybody can worship the way they wish to worship, and that our Jewish friends never have to live in fear that violence will be visited upon them. That statistic that Jeff Finkelstein gave us is sobering. The fact that such a small percentage of the population has to endure such a high percentage of the violence. That needs to end, and Pittsburgh would be a great place for it to end. Thank you.
Hi, Pittsburgh. It's great to see so many people out here this evening. It's unfortunate, though, that we have to gather again to remind our neighbors about the importance of a simple fact. As a Christian, as a Catholic, we call it love one another. It's an understanding that we're all thrown on this big rock spinning out in space, and the only way that we're going to be able to survive is by working together. It's unfortunate that this sacred little part of the world, Pittsburgh, is recognized as the scene of the most horrific attack of anti-Semitism in American history. But there's a responsibility that we have to those neighbors that we lost back in 2018. And that is for all of us, not only for our Jewish community, not only for those who are Orthodox or conservative or Reformed, but for those that are Muslim, for those that are Christian, Catholic, Hindu, Buddhist, to be able to recognize that an attack against one is an attack against all. That's what we learned in 2018, when we found that for one of the first times in 4,000 years of persecution against Jews, a community stood up for its neighbors and said, never again means never again. It's what we see in the very real and present dangers of neo-Nazism and terrorism, and in the hidden whispers of anti-Zionism, which is nothing more than anti-Semitism. After the Holocaust of World War II, the world recognized that a free, democratic state for the Jewish community had to be built in order to preserve and to save a living legacy of this earth. And Israel was created. The United States and nations around the world gave its support to not only the success of this nation, but to the protection of it. And as we hear the whispers of the elimination of a Jewish state, we must recognize what that truly means, the elimination of a Jewish society. We must stand together, united, in an understanding that when we talk about a city for all, when we talk about a world for all, it can only be built upon the ideals that we hold as sacred. The United States has been a partner of Israel since its inception. And today, as a city that has understood the horrific effects of what anti-Semitism truly means, we must be that example and gather together. In my 30 years of working in this building, one of the greatest treasures that I will always hold is being in that initial group of leaders, so many of whom I see here, that created the Pittsburgh Interfaith Impact Network. And working back then with Reverend Grayson, understanding that no matter how it is that we honor our God, we do so to one God. And understanding that by working together, we can make this community stronger. In those 20 years since the beginning, I watched firsthand as the Jewish community marched to the Islamic Center after 9/11 and handed them an American flag that is still there and said that you are our neighbors. I was there in the rain on October 27, 2018, standing outside of Tree of Life and looking across the street as the Islamic Center was standing in the rain with all of us. And I know that power, and I know that that is the light that you look for in darkness. And just as Pittsburgh will always be remembered as that site of the worst act of anti-Semitism in American history, let us not forget the strength of the people of this city by understanding that we are all one of God's children, and that by working together and protecting one another, we can build that planet that we want to live in. But it starts what we do at home.
Good evening. My name is Marianne Lien, and I am the current president of the Organization of Chinese Americans here at the Pittsburgh chapter. Thank you to the Jewish Federation for inviting me. I couldn't be more proud to be standing up here representing our Chinese community and standing solidly with our Jewish community members. Many of you know it's been an incredibly painful year for my community. And the number so far in this last year has risen above 6,600 cases of hate that has been reported. That, we know, is just a fraction of the real crimes that is happening to my community. The one group, the one community that immediately came to our aid, that immediately stood up and said, how can we help, was the Jewish community here in Pittsburgh. Jewish Americans and Asian Americans have much in common when it comes to experiencing hate-based incidents. Jewish people have historically been victims of street crime and governmental discrimination through restrictive immigration policies, just as we, Asian Americans, have suffered as objects of yellow peril, racism, Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, internment of 120,000 of our Japanese Americans during World War II, and now this latest scapegoating of both of our communities because of geopolitical tensions. There are those who are conflating their anger for the conflict between Israel and Hamas with the Jewish people here in the United States and the world over. This anger has emboldened the dangerous actors, and just as they were scapegoating my community during the pandemic, they are attacking Jews and Jewish communities with far-reaching ramifications. This must stop. OCA Pittsburgh stands with our Jewish community members. You are our friends, you are our neighbors, and we say you meet this resistance with resilience, and I cannot think of a community more resilient than you. You matter to us, you matter to this community. Stay strong.
Hello everybody, my name is Tim Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Center of Life, which is based in the Hazelwood community, the pastor of the Keystone Church of Hazelwood. And I come to stand with my Jewish brothers and sisters against hate and violence in any way, shape, or form. How many of you believe in early childhood development? We believe in early childhood development, that every child should get the absolute best education possible at the earliest time in their existence, then we believe that we can actually have a stronger country, because there'd be more people who were educated and exposed to the absolute best in technology and information and everything else, getting the truth about our history, all of those kinds of things. Well, let me tell you something. On October 27th, I was running through Squirrel Hill on my way to Hazelwood just before the shooting. And when I found out about the shooting, the first thing I did was called my friends who were at the Tree of Life. I called them because we have a relationship. I called them because our relationship is not based on misinformation, preconceived notions, or stereotypes. I called them because we love each other. At the end of the day, everything starts at home. The question is, how are we going to raise our children? What are we going to teach our children? How are we going to send the truth out there so that people will know what the truth is about all of our people? Racism, injustice, hate in any way, shape, or form is just wrong. And so together, now more than ever, we need to press into each other. We need to come close to each other. We need to link up arms, not just reach out, but we need to reach out and touch each other, linking up, pulling our resources together, and showing the world how we are one people. We're one people. We are all at the table. We are different, but we are not different more or different less. We're just different. And we celebrate our differences. And as a result, we have come together here today to say to the world that we stand with our Jewish brothers and sisters, even as they have stood with us down through the years, down through our civil rights movements, and all of the different movements. And I won't go into the statistics because statistics are kind of flatline. But I talk about relationships because I know that when you have a relationship with somebody, it makes all the difference. When you know my face, and not just the things that people say about me, when you know my children, when you know how I live, when you know how I eat, when you understand the realness about me, it changes everything. And I think everybody out here knows that. I think all of us know that. And so I would encourage us, let's build relationships, because those relationships will build the love that we have for each other, and that's going to be greater than the hate that is trying to grow in our community. communities. Thank you. Let's stand together.
Thank you, Brother Tim. My name is Jeffrey Myers. I'm the Rabbi of Tree of Life. I didn't think I'd be standing once again in Pittsburgh for an anti-Semitism rally. I thought the one in Point State Park, November of 2018, would be sufficient. Apparently not. I remember as a kid, classmates throwing pennies at me, telling me to pick them up because Jews are cheap and we pick up pennies. Getting into fights with classmates because I'm Jewish. Not being permitted to enter or swim at the community swim club because they didn't allow Jews. And my father was the judge in the town. I'm proud of him because one day, years later, they approached him as their membership was waning and asked him if he would join. And he said to them what they could do with their application. But the most memorable for me, coming home one day from school, I think I was around 10 years old. In the driveway of my house were 2 swastikas and the words, "Jeffrey was a dirty Jew." That was my introduction to Holocaust education. And to this day, that image is seared in my brain. I'm tired of being a victim. I will no longer be a victim. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, they should include women, are created equal, and all are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, amongst them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It should be familiar to all of you. It's the Declaration of Independence. It doesn't hold it that some people are created equal. All people are created equal. And guess what? It's a compact between the Declaration and every person who's in this country. It's not a cafeteria. You don't get to pick which words you like in the Declaration. You don't get to say, I'll have the corn or I'll have the peas, but I'm not having the carrots. If you're in this country, you have no choice but to accept every damn word of that Declaration of Independence. And if you don't like it and you treat other people a different way, then you are un-American. Your race, your color, your sex, sexual orientation, your age, none of that matters or should matter in the United States, because the Declaration makes it clear it doesn't matter. So for those who decide that it does matter to some, and it only applies to some people, get with the program. It applies to every single American. So when they come after the Jews and make it more difficult, my answer to you is more anti-Semitism, we do more Jewish. More H, more Jewish. If you don't like Shabbos candles, go home. Get a set of candlesticks, get a set of candles, light those candles this Friday night as an act of being Jewish, as an act of defiance to saying, we are still here. We are the oldest religious civilization on this planet. We've seen the most sublime that humanity can offer. We've suffered the most horrific that humanity can offer. And we are here as the world's historians to say, enough is enough. We're not going to take it sitting down anymore. It's time to move on as one just society. Let's no longer be a silent majority. We've been silent too long. Let's be a vocal majority, saying, if the words of the Declaration mean anything to you, stand up and say so. And to the naysayers, let them be the minority. Let the good people of America finally speak up as a majority and say, genug, enough.
Turner, and I'm the Director of Community Relations at the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. I want to thank all of you for being here today, the City of Pittsburgh, so many of our elected officials, interfaith partners, and leaders for standing with us against anti-Semitism. It reminds me of how many of you stood with us on October 28, 2018, one day after the shooting at the Tree of Life building. We felt the need to gather as a community in response to the 500% increase of anti-Semitic incidents over the past few weeks. I've been heartbroken to hear stories of friends who have decided to take off their Star of David necklace or remove Hebrew from their Twitter bios out of fear of being the next target. Not only has this rise inflicted fear and trauma in our community, at times it felt like no one else cared. I've seen many within the Jewish community recently share the famous Martin Niemöller quote that is outside of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. I think you all know it. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I fear that our society has not heeded this call. Several synagogues and Holocaust memorials have been desecrated. As the Jewish community continued to be verbally and physically assaulted, where were our friends? Who was willing to condemn anti-Semitism alone without the infamous, but hate against all people is wrong? Why has it been so uncomfortable to name it? Why does qualification closely follow one's condemnation? Why has silence been politically correct? Maybe the Jewish community had been living in an echo chamber. Maybe the broader community just didn't see it in the way that we did. If this is true for you, I'll share a few examples of things that I've seen on my own social media platforms in the last couple of weeks. Isn't it time for Jews to stop using the Holocaust card? Zionists and Jews are the new Nazis. I get why no other country wanted them. I'm not citing extreme examples to shock you. I'm providing a sampling of language that has become pervasive. We have seen a disturbing trend of comparing events and the recent escalation of violence in the Middle East to wearing masks during a pandemic and comparing them to the Holocaust. Hyperbolic comparisons and weaponization of the Holocaust does not only inflict trauma on Jews, but it is a form of Holocaust denial. If you are quick to compare these things to the systemic government-sanctioned murder of 6 million Jews, you clearly do not understand or choose not to understand what that really means. According to the ADL, Hitler was right was posted over 17,000 times over a 1-week period last month. Our community knows only too well the devastating consequences of when hate-filled words become violent action. Social media has become a place where political activism has been a shield to outwardly express anti-Semitism, and the consequences can be deadly. I can only hope that our friends are willing to stand with us before history repeats itself. Jewish people in the United States have often been viewed as a minority success story. Many are white or white passing and benefit from privilege, but that is only part of the story. Not only does this erase the diversity of our community, but it also does not keep us safe. The illusion of assimilation and success does not protect those in our community who are visibly Jewish by wearing religious clothing. It does not protect those who worship at synagogue on Saturday mornings. It does not protect those who are targeted on the streets for looking like Zionists. And it does not protect those who are doxxed and harassed on social media for being outwardly Jewish. This is not activism. This is anti-Semitism. And this is the right time to stand up and speak out. If you have been unsure about how to be an ally, attending this gathering and listening to Jewish voices is a good start. Jewish people are the authority on what is anti-Semitism. Listen to them, and not just ones that fit into a certain box or pass a moral purity test. Anti-Semitism does not just affect the Jewish community, it affects all of us. Anti-Semitism is at the center of white supremacy. Anti-Semitism on the left is very real, and calling it out should not be a political issue. When the Jewish community is targeted, chances are other minority and marginalized communities will be targeted. I am prepared to stand with you if and when that happens. I hope you will stand with us now. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate you standing with our community, and that concludes our event. Thank you so much.